It was the summer of 2006 in Grimsboro, a small, seemingly tranquil town nestled at the edge of the dense Everwood forest in the northeastern United States. I was 22 at the time, fresh out of college and back in my hometown, eager to spend my days relaxing before the grind of adult life began. I am a woman, and back then, I had an insatiable curiosity for the unknown, a trait that led me down a path I wish I could erase from my memory. My childhood friend Alex and I decided to explore the Everwood forest. Local legends whispered of shadows that whispered back, of figures that weren't quite human lurking in the thicket. We laughed off these tales as nothing more than attempts to scare children away from wandering too deep into the woods. How I wish that's all they were. On a particularly humid July evening, Alex suggested we go camping in Everwood. For old time's sake, he said. The nostalgia, the thrill of an adventure, and perhaps my own naivety nudged me to agree. We packed our bags, grabbed a tent, and set off into the heart of the forest. The first night was exactly as we hoped. We shared stories, roasted marshmallows, and reminisced about our childhood escapades. It was the kind of night I wanted to freeze in time. But as the fire died down and the forest around us grew eerily silent, the atmosphere shifted. A suffocating sense of being watched crept over me. Alex must have felt it too. His once easy laughter faded, replaced by a tense silence. Around midnight, the quiet was shattered by a sound that chilled me to my core. A whisper so clear yet sourceless that seemed to echo from the darkness itself. "Leave," it hissed, a warning or a threat, I couldn't tell. Alex heard it too. I saw the fear in his eyes. We convinced ourselves it was just the wind, or perhaps a prank by locals, trying to scare us off. We were wrong. The second night, the whispers grew louder, more persistent, and they were accompanied by shadows that moved against the logic of our firelight. These weren't ordinary shadows. They seemed to absorb the light, creating pockets of impenetrable darkness around our campsite. Despite our fear, we were paralyzed, unable to leave, as if the forest itself had ensnared us. On the third day, we decided enough was enough. We packed up at dawn, determined to leave the horrors of Everwood behind. But as we made our way out, the forest seemed unfamiliar. The paths twisted and turned in ways we didn't remember. It took us hours more than it should have to finally emerge from the tree line. Looking back, I saw the shadows at the edge of the forest, watching, waiting. We never spoke of what happened, not really. Alex moved away not long after, and we lost touch. But the experience haunted me. I started researching, poring over old town records and newspaper archives. What I found was a pattern of disappearances dating back centuries, all linked to the Everwood forest. People who ventured too deep, never to return, their stories fading into legend. I'm older now, wiser perhaps, but the memory of those nights in Everwood still lingers. Sometimes when the wind howls just right, I swear I can hear the whispers again, calling me back. But I know better than to listen. Grimsboro may look peaceful, but beneath its veneer lies a darkness, an ancient evil that preys on the curious and the brave. So consider this a warning. If you ever find yourself in Grimsboro, drawn to the allure of Everwood Forest, remember my story. Stay away from the shadows that whisper back, for not everyone who hears them lives to tell the tale. In the spring of 2014, I moved into a quaint, somewhat aged, two-story house on a peaceful street lined with towering elm trees in the heart of a sleepy Midwestern town. I was 28 years old, eager to start a new chapter in my life after accepting a teaching position at a nearby high school. My excitement for this fresh start, however, would soon be overshadowed by events I still struggle to fully understand or explain. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my dream home became a place of nightmares. The house, while charming with its Victorian facade and intricate woodwork, had been on the market for years before I bought it. The price was suspiciously low for its size and location, but as a single woman with a teacher's salary, it seemed like a fortunate find. Neighbors would later tell me the house had a turnover problem, with previous owners leaving abruptly, but specifics were always skirted, chalked up to the usual gossip of a small town. The first few weeks were uneventful, filled with the chaos of unpacking and settling in. But as the dust settled, so too did an unsettling feeling of being watched. Initially, I chalked it up to the loneliness of living alone for the first time in my life. That was until the night I heard footsteps. It was a quiet Thursday evening. I was in the living room grading papers when the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed from the floor above. Frozen in fear, I listened as they paced back and forth from one end of the hallway to the other. I lived alone. There was no logical explanation. Gathering every ounce of courage, I went to investigate, armed with nothing but a flashlight. The upstairs was empty, the silence oppressive. The feeling of being watched intensified, suffocating. I convinced myself it was the house settling, a feeble attempt to rationalize what I knew in my gut to be something else. But it didn't stop there. Objects began to move on their own. Doors would slam shut in the dead of night, and the footsteps became a nightly occurrence. Each event chipped away at my resolve, my sense of safety eroding with each passing day. Then came the night that changed everything. I awoke to the sensation of being suffocated, an invisible force pressing down on my chest. I tried to scream, to move, but I was paralyzed, trapped in my own body. As suddenly as it began, it stopped, leaving me gasping for air in the darkness. I did what I should have done weeks earlier. I started researching the history of the house. Buried in the local library's archives, I discovered a series of articles detailing a tragic event that occurred in the late 1800s. The original owner, a prominent but troubled doctor, had poisoned his entire family before taking his own life in the house. The pieces fell into place, each strange occurrence a haunting echo of the home's dark past. I couldn't stay another night. I packed what I could and left before dawn, leaving behind more than just belongings, but a piece of myself as well. I moved far from that street with the elm trees and never looked back. The house remains, standing as a silent sentinel on that peaceful street, its stories and secrets hidden within. My experience taught me that some things, once unseen, cannot be forgotten or unseen. The memory of my time there lingers, a haunting reminder of the unseen tenant who shared my home. In the fall of 2018, I returned to my small hometown in the Pacific Northwest, after spending several years abroad for work. My name is Michael, and at the time, I was 34 years old, grappling with the recent loss of my father and the responsibilities of handling his estate. Among the properties he left behind was an old, run-down cabin on Old Cedar Road, located deep within a thick, almost impenetrable forest that the locals claimed was as old as time itself. The cabin had been in our family for generations, but due to my father's long illness, it had been neglected for years. It stood isolated, a good 20 miles from the nearest town, and the only access was a narrow, winding road that seemed to consume those who traveled it. My father had always been strangely protective of the cabin, warning us never to go there alone or at night, advice we, as children, heeded without question. I arrived in late October, the forest a riot of autumnal color, the air crisp and carrying the scent of pine and earth. The cabin was in worse shape than I remembered. The wood was rotting, windows boarded up, and an overwhelming sense of desolation hung about the place. It felt as though the forest itself had been waiting, not for my father, but for me. I decided to stay the night, driven by a mix of nostalgia and a desire to connect with something my father had loved. The first few hours were spent cleaning and exploring the contents of the cabin, which included my grandfather's old journals. As night fell, an unnerving silence enveloped the cabin, a silence so dense it felt almost suffocating. That's when I first heard the whispers. They were soft, indiscernible at first, like leaves rustling in the wind. But as the night deepened, they grew clearer, more insistent. They seemed to come from the woods themselves, circling the cabin. A chorus of voices that spoke in a language I couldn't understand but felt inexplicably drawn to. I tried to dismiss it as the wind, or perhaps the creaking of an old house settling into the night. But then came a knock at the door, gentle but deliberate. My heart froze. No one knew I was here, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. The knocks persisted, growing in urgency. But when I gathered the courage to look outside, nothing was there but the impenetrable darkness of the forest. The night passed in a haze of fear and disbelief. The whispers continued, a constant presence that seemed to be testing my sanity. By dawn, I was convinced I had to leave, that the cabin and perhaps the land itself harbored something unnatural, something my father had known and kept from us. As I left, the forest seemed to watch, the whispers following me until I reached the main road. It's been years since that night, but the experience has stayed with me, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lie in the heart of Old Cedar Road. I've never returned to the cabin, nor do I plan to. Some things are better left untouched, secrets that belong to the forest in the past. My name is Ethan, and I was 27 years old when my life was irrevocably changed by the events that occurred in the small, forgotten town of Hallows Creek. This story takes place in the autumn of 2015, in a remote part of New England, where the dense forests seem to whisper secrets of the past, and the towns are small enough that everyone knows your name, or your business. I had recently taken up a job as a journalist for a local newspaper, driven by a passion for uncovering the truth and a desire to escape the monotony of city life. Hallows Creek, with its rich history and picturesque landscapes, seemed like the perfect place to start anew. However, I soon learned that some truths are better left undiscovered. My curiosity was piqued by a series of unexplained disappearances that had plagued Hallows Creek for decades. Every few years, someone would vanish without a trace, only for their belongings to be found at the edge of the forest that bordered the town. The local police had long since given up on finding answers, attributing the disappearances to accidents, or people simply leaving town to start over. But the patterns were too consistent, the stories too similar to ignore. I began my investigation by speaking with the families of the missing, who shared their stories of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. Their grief was palpable, a constant reminder of the human cost of these mysteries. As I delved deeper into the town's history, I discovered ancient folklore about spirits that guarded the forest, punishing those who dared to disturb their slumber. One October evening, driven by a mixture of determination and foolish bravery, I decided to venture into the forest myself. Equipped with a flashlight, a recorder, and a naive belief in my own invincibility, I walked into the woods, intent on uncovering the truth. At first, the forest was eerily silent, the only sound my own footsteps crunching on the autumn leaves. But as night fell, the silence gave way to whispers. They were faint at first, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from all around me. I pressed on, convinced that my mind was playing tricks on me, until I reached a clearing where the air turned cold, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was there that I saw it, a shadowy figure, just at the edge of my flashlight's beam. It was human in shape, but seemed to be made of the darkness itself, its edges blurring into the night. I felt a chill run down my spine, and fear, raw and primal, took hold. The figure moved towards me, and I heard my name whispered among the voices, 1,000 tones, speaking as one. I don't remember how I made it out of the forest that night. My next clear memory is of waking up in my bed, the morning light streaming through the window, the recorder lying on the nightstand. The recording contained nothing but static and the faintest hint of whispers, a mocking testament to my experience. After that night, I stopped my investigation into the disappearances. Some warned me to leave Hallows Creek while I still could, but I chose to stay, haunted by the knowledge of what lies in the forest. The disappearances haven't stopped, and I find myself looking over my shoulder, wondering if the day will come when I too will vanish without a trace. The truth of Hallows Creek remains buried in the shadows of the forest, a mystery that I no longer have the courage to unravel. The whispers still reach me on the wind, a constant reminder of the night I came face to face with something beyond understanding. My name is Lucas, and I was 29 years old when I encountered something that forever altered my perception of reality. This happened in late 2017, in a secluded coastal village in northern Scotland, where I had moved to escape the hustle and bustle of London life. The village, with its stark cliffs and turbulent seas, was known for its breathtaking views and a sense of isolation that seemed almost otherworldly. Little did I know, it also harbored a dark secret, one that had been whispered about in local lore, but never truly believed. I took up residence in a modest cottage that overlooked the sea, drawn by the relentless sound of the waves and the endless horizon. My days were spent writing, my nights lulled by the rhythmic crashing of the sea against the cliffs. It was peaceful, serene even, until the night the storms came. It started as a typical storm, but it quickly intensified, the winds howling like the cries of 1,000 lost souls, the rain a torrential downpour that seemed to want to erase everything in its path. That night, as I lay in bed, trying to drown out the storm with thoughts of my next novel, I heard a knock at my door. Thinking it was perhaps a neighbor in need, I braved the storm to answer, only to find no one there. Confused, I chalked it up to the wind, until I heard it again, more insistent this time. Again, I opened the door to an empty doorstep. But as I turned to go back inside, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A figure, shrouded in the rain and darkness, standing at the edge of the cliff, staring out into the tumultuous sea. I rubbed my eyes, thinking the storm was playing tricks on me, but when I looked again, the figure was gone. Shaken, I spent the night with every light in the cottage blazing, the storm raging on outside. The next morning, under a clear blue sky, I ventured out to the cliffside, driven by a need to understand what I had seen. There, I found an old, weather-beaten plaque that told the tale of a shipwreck from centuries ago, where all hands were lost to the sea. It was said that on stormy nights, the souls of the drowned sailors would return, seeking the warmth and safety they were denied in their final moments. The logical part of my mind rejected the notion, but the seed of fear had been planted. The villagers spoke of similar sightings, always during the worst storms, always at the same spot on the cliff. They spoke in hushed tones, a mixture of fear and respect for the sea and its dead. I tried to continue my life as before, but the tranquility of the sea now held a note of melancholy, its beauty marred by the knowledge of what lay beneath. My nights were restless, every storm bringing with it a sense of dread. Eventually, I left the village, unable to shake the feeling of being watched from the depths. The experience has stayed with me, a haunting reminder of the power of nature and the echoes of the past that ripple beneath its surface. The sea, with its captivating beauty and terrifying depth, holds secrets not meant for the living. And some nights, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear the knocks at my door, an echo of a storm long past. I'm Alex, and I was 25 years old when I stumbled upon a secret that would forever haunt my dreams. It was the summer of 2019, and I had recently inherited Ashton Manor, an imposing yet majestic estate located in the heart of rural England, from an uncle I barely knew existed. Despite its beauty, the manor was known among locals for its eerie atmosphere and the countless stories that whispered through the halls of time. I, being a man of science and logic, paid no mind to these tales. I saw the manor as nothing more than a grand, albeit neglected piece of architecture that was mine to restore. However, my perception changed one stifling summer evening when I discovered a room that wasn't supposed to exist. Ashton Manor was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each telling its own story of decades past. But it was in the oldest wing of the house, a section I had previously thought to be well acquainted with, that I found a peculiar discrepancy in the blueprints, an unaccounted space between two rooms. Curiosity, mingled with a sense of unease, propelled me to investigate. Behind what I had assumed to be a solid wall covered in aging wallpaper was a door. It was remarkably well hidden, seamlessly blending into its surroundings. The door was locked, but after several attempts, it gave way to a room that time had forgotten. The air was thick with dust, and a musty odor permeated my senses. The room was small, windowless, and sparsely furnished with a desk, a chair, and a bookshelf filled with volumes of literature that seemed centuries old. It was as if I had stepped into a different era. But it was what lay on the desk that sent chills down my spine. A diary, its pages yellowed with age, belonging to a woman who had lived in the manor in the early 1800s. As I flipped through the pages, a story of love, betrayal, and a curse unfolded. The woman, it seemed, was accused of witchcraft and condemned to spend her remaining days locked away in this very room, her pleas for innocence ignored. Her final entry was a curse upon those who wronged her, promising that the truth would one day come to light, and with it, retribution. The temperature in the room dropped, and the once still air began to stir. I heard whispers, soft and sorrowful, echoing off the walls. The feeling of being watched overwhelmed me, and I fled the room, sealing the door behind me. In the days that followed, the atmosphere of the manor changed. Objects moved of their own accord. Cold spots appeared in the warmest of rooms, and the whispers became a constant presence. Sleep eluded me. For every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, her silhouette lurking in the shadows, her eyes filled with centuries of pain and anger. Unable to bear the weight of her gaze, I delved into the history of Ashton Manor and uncovered the truth about the woman. She was indeed accused of witchcraft, but evidence suggested that she was innocent, a victim of fear and jealousy. I made her story public, clearing her name in the hope of granting her peace. Since then, the disturbances have ceased, and the whispers have faded into silence. But the room remains, a testament to a dark chapter in the manor's history. I've left it untouched, a memorial of sorts, to remind myself of the past's power to reach through the veil of time. I no longer view Ashton Manor solely as an architectural marvel, but as a keeper of secrets, some of which are better left undiscovered. My nights are still restless, for though the whispers have quieted, the memory of her eyes, filled with sorrow and rage, haunts me still. It was the fall of 2020, amidst the chaos of a world grappling with pandemic fears, that I found myself moving into a seemingly quaint house on Maple Drive in a small, old New England town. I was 30 years old, seeking a fresh start away from the crowded city, and the isolation due to the pandemic only fueled my desire for solitude. My name is Julia, and what I encountered in that house challenged my understanding of reality and left me with scars no one can see. The house was a charming, if somewhat dilapidated, two-story Victorian with a history as old as the town itself. I was drawn to its character and the promise of quiet days spent renovating and working from home. However, I soon realized that the house, and perhaps the town, harbored secrets that were anything but quiet. Almost immediately, I felt an oppressive sense of being watched. It started with small, easily dismissible occurrences. Doors creaking open, the sound of footsteps in the empty hallway, whispers in the dead of night. I rationalized it as the house settling or the wind. But then, the shadows began to move. At first, it was just out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting darkness that seemed to dart from room to room. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, the stress of the move, or perhaps too much coffee. But as autumn deepened into winter, the days grew shorter, and the nights longer. Those fleeting shadows took on a more sinister presence. I would wake in the middle of the night to find the room colder than usual, my breath visible in the air, and the feeling of something, or someone, standing at the foot of my bed. On several occasions, I saw what looked like the silhouette of a person, but when I blinked or reached for the light, there was nothing there. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I began to research the history of the house and Maple Drive. I discovered that the original owner of my house was a woman named Sarah, who had been accused of witchcraft in the late 1600s and executed. Her family was ostracized, and their history became a dark stain on the town's past. The more I learned, the more intense the occurrences became. It was as if acknowledging the house's history had awakened something. The final straw came one night when I clearly heard a woman's voice whispering my name. The sound so close I could almost feel the breath on my ear. I turned to confront my visitor, only to be met with an empty room. I couldn't stay after that. I packed my essentials and left the house on Maple Drive, seeking refuge with a friend in the city. The events of those few months have left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the world. I still feel the weight of unseen eyes on me, and sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I swear I can hear her whispering, calling me back to the house on Maple Drive. The experience has changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. I've become more withdrawn, wary of the shadows that linger in the corners of my vision. I know I can never return to Maple Drive, but part of me remains there, caught in the grip of something ancient and unseen. And there we have it, folks. Our journey through the shadows and into the chilling depths of human nature has come to an end. I hope these tales have sent shivers down your spine, made you glance over your shoulder, or even question the ordinary moments of your daily lives. If you've enjoyed this exploration into the darker side of the human psyche, please don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. You can always share your thoughts, feelings, or even your own creepy experiences in the comments below. We love hearing from our listeners. And if you're new here or haven't yet joined our Horror Stories family, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our future tales of the macabre and mysterious. Until next time, stay safe, keep the lights on, and remember, the real monsters might be closer than you think.